Throw out the rundown. The Reds have their backup catcher.
Jeff, settle down.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Jose Trevino, apparently. No, I'm just kidding. You are Locked On Reds. We are your daily source for all things Cincinnati Reds. I'm Stephen Offenbaker. That excited guy over there is Jeff Carr, and we love baseball. We love the Cincinnati Reds. We have taken our love for this team and our love for the game, and we have turned that into information for you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And on today's podcast, we, of course, are going to be talking about the Reds getting their backup catcher, getting catcher number 2 in a trade with the New York Yankees. We're also going to take a look at a couple pitchers that the Reds have picked up this month. One of them might be a little bit more important than the other, but we're going to dig through both of them. And then we're going to take a moment and just kind of reset where the Reds are, where we think they are with the 26-man roster, who we know for sure will be there, how many spots are open. We're just going to kind of push the reset button and get a good overarching look at things before we head into the new year. We're going to do all of that on today's episode that's brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase over at GameTime. All right, Jeff. Jose Trevino for Fernando Cruz and Alex Jackson. That's what they did. The Reds made a deal with the Yankees. They went out and got catcher number 2. And I know you're excited, and I know you're messing with me a little bit. You're just, goofing around. It's not breaking news. It wasn't worth going live for. There was no press conference, but this was, in fact, what you and I both agree was a solid move by the Reds to shore up a definite team need.
And that's the key, right? A solid move. I'm not saying print the playoff tickets. I'm not saying go get season tickets so you can get your World Series. I'm not saying any of that. But I like this move by Nick Krall. Let's kind of break this down. Fernando Cruz, aging right-handed relief pitcher, and Alex Jackson, who they just signed to a minor league deal like 30 minutes ago. And they sent those two guys to New York for Jose Trevino, who is a really, really good fielding catcher, at least as far as blocking the plate is concerned and getting that extra strike. He is elite. And I'm not even sensationalizing that word here. He is elite at framing. According to Baseball Savant, he was in the top 5% of all catchers in his ability to frame last year. And so that is a huge upgrade for the Reds. Jose Trevino over Luke Bailey. And I think that we were all starting to feel, at least when you looked at the free agent market, like a reunion with Luke Bailey was inevitable. And so credit to Nick Krall for thinking outside the box here. I like this move from the position of what the Reds got back. And then when you break it down to what they give up, I love Fernando Cruz, and you know as well as I do that I was one of the few guys left on the hype train for Fernando Cruz. Mm-hmm. But I understand this move. I think that at the end of the day, if you are a Fernando Cruz detractor, if you are a Fernando Cruz realist, I see your point of view on this, and I'm not going to argue that hard that this was a huge loss for the Reds. I think that Nick Krall made the right trade.
I agree. I think this was a good move. I think that you're bringing in a guy who's won a Gold Glove. You're bringing in a guy that's been an all-star for the New York Yankees. As a matter of fact, his best professional year as a catcher in the big league came his very first year in New York. That's not something that's easy to do. Everyone that has ever gone to New York tells you there's a period of adjustment there, but that was his best year. He went in and played 115 games that year. He slashed 248, 283, 388. Not huge numbers, but he hit 11 dingers at Yankee Stadium, which was good for an OPS plus of 89. So, not a world beater, but it was an all-star year for him. That's exactly what you're looking for in your backup catcher. This is not a guy that's being brought in to press Tyler Stevenson. This is not a guy that's being brought in to do anything but not give you a massive hole in the lineup on the days that that Tyler has to be off. This is a move where Jose will get in there. He's going to play because he's the second catcher on this roster. He'll be in a lot of games. He's going to play, and he has the threat of doing some things while he's in there. Separate from that, I like the fact that he's been a Gold Glove catcher. I love what you're telling me about his ability to frame. I think he's going to work well with this pitching staff, and I think he's a good fit. You know, it's not, again, not a press conference move, not something that, you know, we're not going to throw out the rundown. We're not, neither one of us texted each other and said, should we go live with this? Is this
No.
Like, neither one of us had that conversation. We recognized it for what it was, but every move is not going to be a press conference move, and every move to make this team better is not going to be something that just sets off lights and sirens when it's done. This is a move that makes the team better, but it's not flashy. It's not overly exciting, but it's something that had to happen. It's something that needed to be dealt with sooner than later. And I think the Reds front office did a good job with this, because they didn't give up a player that was really, I kept asking you if Fernando Cruz was going to be in this bullpen. I wasn't even sure that when this all shook out, with the fact that Graham Ashcraft is going into this bullpen, I wasn't sure that Fernando Cruz was going to be around. I thought maybe he was going to be on the Louisville shuttle bus back and forth. So this, for me, is not a huge loss.
No, and I think that's kind of an important thing to talk about in this trade, is that Fernando Cruz had an elite pitch. He wasn't an elite pitcher. There's a difference. Like, his splitter was one of the best pitches in baseball. There's very few ways that you could argue against that, but you even the most hardened of Fernando Cruz fans, and myself, will tell you, if the splitter wasn't working, he wasn't working, and you needed to get him out of there as quickly as you could, because if he wasn't dropping that in there and fooling guys to swing and miss, or if he wasn't able to hit the corner of the strike zone with it or something like that, if it wasn't fooling anybody, the fastball and the slider won't fool anybody either. Those pitches were there to set up the splitter. So that's going to be something interesting to watch as he moves through the game. Is he going to be a part of their big league bullpen? Because I think that's how you have to evolve if you're Fernando Cruz. Those other pitches have to be better. You can't just be a one-trick pony. And, I mean, it worked for Mariano Rivera, and maybe that's why the Yankees went for this deal. They're like, hey, we did this with somebody before. We could do it again. But while Fernando Cruz has this amazing story, and he's so easy to root for, and he has a great personality, and he's the kind of guy that's easy to rally around, I don't know that having Fernando Cruz on this team made them a playoff team, because he's been here for a few years, and they haven't made the playoffs. So if he is not here next year, does that mean that the Reds are no longer a playoff team? No. So this was a good move. And Alex Jackson, I saw one person, I think, on X push back on me like, well, Alex Jackson could have pushed to be the backup guy. Yeah, right. Like, come on. This is like when you're in fantasy football and you pick up some guy off the waiver wire and then you trade him for an actual starting player. Like, Jose Trevino is going to fit in so well where Luke Maile was last year. I saw a stat, and I think I'm generalizing, but give or take a few numbers on each of this. He played 45 games, and the Reds were 15-30 in those 45 games. Now, is that all on him? No. But I think that replacing him with Jose Trevino, the Reds are going to be better in those 45 games.
Yeah, and the quite frankly, the free agent market, what's left out there weren't really very many options. I had a couple comments on Twitter X talking about, well, they could have went and got Tucker Barnhart for almost free and not had to give up a pitcher like, listen, Tucker Barnhart in his last two seasons, 2 years ago for the Cubs, he was 50% below league average. And last year for the Arizona Diamondbacks, he was 60% below league average. That was not a viable move. I know there's the feel good nostalgia of it all. That was not an option. I think this was the way that it had to be. A trade had to be made. And again, kudos to the front office for getting it done without really impacting what they were trying to do heading into the 2025 season.
The tough part about the offseason and making moves to make the roster better, Nick Kroll and company are making moves for production now. They are not making moves based on production yesterday. And that's the hardest part of their job. That's the hardest part of any Major League Baseball front office's job, is that just because a guy hit 300 last year, or just because a guy had an ERA under 3 last year, that doesn't mean he's going to do the exact same thing again next year. You got to evaluate what he looks like moving forward. And I don't necessarily know that Tucker Barnhart was going to provide a lot of value there. So they got a guy that will. And maybe he can even impart some of that framing eliteness onto Tyler Stevenson and both guys. The catching tandem, as I saw a comment on my TikTok about this, the catching tandem then becomes elite at framing. That would be fantastic. But I like this trade. And I think that the trade opened up a spot for one of the pitchers that the Reds got on a minor league deal. I'm going to tell you why that is coming up next.
You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets to any event with GameTime. Just download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Jeff and I tell you about this app all the time. We use it for Reds games all summer long. We head down to the banks. We grab a spot, we grab some food, we grab a drink, and then just before first pitch, we jump on GameTime. We get our tickets at greatly discounted prices. You can do the same. You can use it for more than just baseball. I'm using it for hockey here coming up pretty soon. I'm going to check out the Seattle Kraken, and I used it to get my tickets for there as well. Never been to a game there, so what do? You jump on. They've got the view from your seat. You know exactly what you're going to be seeing, what exactly the view is going to be, and with all-in pricing, you know exactly what it's going to cost. So just download the GameTime app today, create that account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off that purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create your account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time.
We are talking about the Reds today, all day, every day, all week, all month, all off season long, getting you ready for what should be a playoff year in 2025. Make sure you subscribe to get at least 30 minutes of Red Stock in your feed every single day. All right, Steve, part of this trade opened up the idea to me that Fernando Cruz was not going to be part of this big league bullpen, and especially because just a little bit before the trade happened, I believe it was on the same day. I know it was before. But the Reds signed a couple of guys to minor league deals, a couple of invites to spring training, non-roster guys that are on little prove-it deals and things like that. One of them has a legitimate shot, and I believe it's because he's a Terry Francona guy. The Reds signed right-handed relief pitcher Bryan Shaw, and he's a guy that I had kind of earmarked a little bit from their World Series run back when Terry Francona was the Cleveland Guardians manager. And that is where he spent his best years as a relief pitcher, was with the Cleveland Guardians. He's bounced around the last few years, hasn't really done a whole lot. And so people are going to look at his statistics immediately and go, all right, who cares about this move? I think, and I'm getting this from some of a couple of our Locked On Guardians guys that says, look, this is a Terry Francona move. And if it's a Terry Francona move, this guy's going to be on the big league roster.
Well, you know, he's had some productive years, 14 big league years, Jeff. That's good for 4.9 total WAR. And if you look at his numbers, 3.96 career big league ERA. You know, he's been around a while. He knows how to pitch at the big league level. Now, you're right. His last few years have left a little bit to be desired. His final year in Cleveland, not that great. His first year in Chicago was actually pretty good for a team that wasn't. You know, he pitched in 38 games with a 4.14 ERA. When we get to last year, he pitched 5 games early in the season for the White Sox and then was out of there. He was granted his outright release, went and signed with the Angels, pitched in their minor league AAA affiliate out in Salt Lake, never cracked the big leagues again. So this, I think, is a prove-it opportunity for him, an opportunity to squeeze one more summer in the sun out of baseball. So he's going to be working really hard to make this team, and I think you're right. It does help that he's a Terry Francona guy. Francona knows what he's capable of, and I think Terry is going to give him the opportunity to show if he's still got something in the tank. And if he does, you're right, he will be part of this big league bullpen.
And I don't think that this is a reason that the Reds signed him. The reason that the Reds got him is because Terry Francona wanted him. But in his past, he has 3 seasons where he led the entire major leagues in games pitched. And he has another season in 2016 where he led the American League when he was pitching for the Guardians, where he led the American League in games pitched. This dude's a workhorse. And I know that we like to joke a little bit about how much the Reds pitched Ian Gibaut, and it felt like they pitched him into the ground. Terry Francona knows that he has pitched Bryan Shaw into the ground, and Bryan Shaw came back and threw even more games the following year. So he knows that this dude can take the workload. And that's going to be the thing, is that it's not necessarily going to be about can he pitch in spring training. I think it's going to be about how he looks. And I'm not even talking about statistics. Like, we're going to be like, oh, what's his ERA? How many strikeouts? What? That's not what we're talking about. Like, Derek Johnson's going to know. Terry Francona is going to know. How's the mechanics look? How's the stuff look? Is it something that they can work with? And then they're going to sign off on it. He's got an inside track to make the opening day roster, but I don't necessarily know that they're penciling him in just yet.
Because this is pretty impressive. This is pretty impressive before you move on to the next guy, because as recently as 2021, you're right, he appeared in a boatload of games. As a matter of fact, in 2021 for Cleveland, he pitched in exactly half of the Guardians games. He played in 81 games. So basically, it didn't shake out this way when you look at his game logs, but every other night, this guy is pitching for the Guardians. That's amazing in modern baseball. That doesn't happen anymore. That is.
You're sitting down, getting the game on television. You got your skyline next to you. You got your nice cold beverage ready to go. And you're just like, look, 6th inning, 7th inning, Bryan Shaw's coming out. We know it because he didn't pitch last night. All right. He's pitching tonight. That's how this goes with him. So I think that he is going to be a guy. And remember, we even wondered whenever the Reds non-tendered Ian Gibaut, we're just like, that felt like a workhorse who was getting healthier, and maybe there's more to it. But we don't know. There's not been any reporting to that effect. But when it comes to Bryan Shaw, he's a guy that if he is of major league caliber, according to the managerial staff, according to DJ and according to Tito, then he's going to get some work, and we're going to see him a lot. This other guy is interesting, and I think it's interesting because he was one of the top prospects in baseball as little as just like 3 years ago for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he is Roansy Contreras. He's a right-handed pitcher as well. He was a starter for the Pirates for a couple of years. In fact, he pitched pretty well against the Reds in his rookie season, and there were some times where I'm like, oh, man, this guy's going to be good for the Pirates. And then something happened, and he fell off a cliff. He wasn't pitching deep into games. They made him a relief pitcher, didn't like him as a relief pitcher. He went to the Angels last year, pitched a tiny little bit, and then they were like, yeah, we don't like him either. So he's coming here on a prove-it deal. Now, I think he's got a much longer shot to make the opening day roster than Bryan Shaw, but he has an interesting talent resume, if not for having really no production to back up that talent.
Yeah, this is a guy that's going to be in his age 25 season. So not a lot of wear and tear on his arm. Definitely has had moments of success. 2022 started in 18 games for the Pirates with a 3.79 ERA. You look at what he did last season for the Angels, 52 innings, 37 games. His problem is he walks too many guys. He lacks a little bit in the command and control department. I think that's something that DJ knows how to fix. So I like this signing. I like bringing in a guy like this that's young, that's probably still teachable, and that there may be an opportunity for Derek Johnson to earn some of that director of pitching money and find something and fix. And if he can do that, this is you're printing money now. You've got a guy that can go out and fill a specific need for this bullpen. I like this. And if it doesn't work out, well, then you're not really out anything either. But there is talent here. There is upside here. And there is an opportunity for Derek Johnson to work with this guy and maybe find something. And I like it. It's not again, all of these moves we're talking about today, Jeff, none of them are, banners and confetti and, bring out the TV cameras kind of moves. None of them are that. But it's going out and getting players that have either done it and could do it again, or players that fill a specific need, or players that have a lot of upside that maybe you can fix. It's all stuff that you can deal with in spring training and help gel this team and maybe find some diamonds in the rough. I like them. It's not, there's people that I see the reactions of, well, the Reds aren't doing anything. They're doing stuff. There's things happening. There's still that big one they got to fill, and we'll spend a lot of time talking about that until they do it. But there are other needs that this team has. There are other places that they either need to create depth, or they either need to maybe find a diamond in a rough that could be a little bit better than what they've got to get this team ready to make a push in 2025. These moves we're seeing right now, those are those type of moves.
And I think that's the important thing about this, right? There's no risk, and the upside is just phenomenal. If it's there, they could really do some good stuff with the pitching staff with these moves. And I think it's interesting. It's a discussion that I want to have later on this week. We're actually going to have a live show on Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And one of the things I really want to discuss on that show is Nick Krall doesn't seem to take big swings. These aren't big swings. And quite frankly, he could look like a genius if they work out. And if they don't work out, nobody's going to remember these moves. They aren't going to be moves that people are just like, man, that was a great move. But when we look back on this offseason, could they be footnotes to a playoff run? That is what Nick Krall is looking for with each one of these moves. I think Bryan Shaw's got a better chance of being in those footnotes than Roansy Contreras. There's an outside shot Roansy Contreras doesn't make it all the way through spring training. But there's also an outside shot that he's on this bullpen on opening day. I'd be interested to see kind of how his journey develops. And I think we'll know pretty quickly. Like if he's coming into spring training games and it looks like he has no idea where home plate is, then you know what? Whatever. That's probably why he was available for a non-roster invite at 25. But Derek Johnson has worked his magic before.
Well, listen, Jeff, the Reds have made moves. They are doing some things. And I think as this year winds down, we're almost to the end of 2024, it might be a good time to take a look at where this 26-man roster is at after the trades of Jonathan India, the changes to the rotation, moves for a backup catcher. Let's take a look at what we think the 26-man looks like right now and how many spots are still in play. We're going to do all of that coming up next.
The NFL playoffs are right around the corner, and quite frankly, we are under 100 days to opening day. There's so much to get in on over on FanDuel. Plus, they've got a great promotion right now. If you start off with a $5 winning bet, you can get $250 in bonus bets. That's at FanDuel.com right now. They've got everything that you need all in one place. If you're watching the game live, they've got stats, they've got all the matchup info, they've got some great live odds, all on the same place where you place your bets. Plus, they've got some off-season futures on Major League Baseball right now. They even have the win totals already. It's a little early, I kind of feel like, in the off-season for win total over-unders. And they have the Reds at 78.5. Do I even need to tell you? In case I do, take the over on FanDuel, 78.5 on the Reds. Man, come on. They're going to fall out of bed with more wins than that this year. That's FanDuel.com. Check them out today. Your first $5 bet that wins gets you $250 in bonus bets. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
If you can't catch us here on YouTube, you can take us on the road with you. We are pretty much available on every podcasting app there is out there. Take us in the car with you. Take us to the gym. Take us for a walk. Wherever you're going, we want to go with you and talk a little Reds baseball. All right, Jeff, let's take a look at this 26-man roster because there have been some changes already. There's changes to the starting rotation. There's some changes in the infield depth, and there are some changes to the bullpen. So a little bit of changes everywhere, and an addition now of a backup catcher. So let's kind of come out and look at the big picture. 26-man roster. Major League Baseball rules say that 13 of those guys have to be pitchers and 13 of those guys have to be position players. On the pitching side of things, as fun as it would be, the Reds are not going to carry 6 starting pitchers. That's not going to be a thing they do, although I'm intrigued by it and will forever be intrigued by it. They're not going to start things off that way. So when you get to your 13 pitchers, 5 of those guys are your starting pitchers, and we already know who those are assuming everybody's healthy.
Yeah, and quite frankly, we know that one of those guys is moving to the bullpen. Or that one of the guys that we saw in the starting rotation from last year is moving to the bullpen. The starting 5 is going to be Hunter Greene, Andrew Abbott, Nick Martinez, Brady Singer, and Nick Lodolo. Then you get into the position players, and there are some obvious guys, Tyler Stevenson and Jose Trevino. Those are your two catchers. You're going to have Elly de la Cruz at short. You're going to have Matt McClain at second. You're going to have Jamer Candelario at first or third or DH or something like that. So you're already up to, there's 5 guys on the position side of things. You're going to have Spencer Steer as well, 6 guys. So then you start to get into, let's assume health. TJ Friedel's on this roster.
Mhm.
And I believe that Jake Fraley is too. I don't even know that there's a move that the Reds can make this offseason that pushes him off of the opening day roster. So you're into 7 position players already and 5 starting pitchers already before you even start to get into the bullpen, before you even start to get into the infield and like the corner infield spots, CES, Noelvi Marte, all that other stuff. I think it fills in pretty obviously.
It does. And really, when we start to look at the depth of this team, when we start to look at some of the things that they've done, I don't even think there's a lot of spaces up for grabs on either side of things. I think when you really shake this out, when you look at who they brought back, doing a deal to bring Sooner back, when you look at, they just traded Fernando Cruz away, that probably creates a spot for one guy. Graham Ashcraft is moving to this bullpen. He's taking up the other spot we thought they might have. You swing around and you look at the outfield and you look at the bench, there's not a lot of spots to be had. Santiago Espinal, he's going to be on this team. He's going to be at the back of this bench. That was the last really infielder type spot that you had. That's after trading away Jonathan India. That's still pretty much a full spot. Nobody else to bring in. The outfield is where it's at. There's room to sign a guy. God, for the love of God, Nick Krall, just go sign a guy.
Do it.
Just make this easier because then you get into a question of how many are they going to carry? Is there going to be 5? Is there going to be 6? If they go sign an outfielder, there may only be 5 outfielders on this roster. And that includes listing Spencer Steer as an outfielder. Yeah. So your depth is Friedel, Mr. Outside Hire, Fraley, and maybe a right-handed partner for him and a spare part. There's your outfield. And Spencer Steer moves around in that scenario. So for me, this team's largely set, Jeff, and barring some kind of earth-shattering trade. And I don't think there's one of those coming based on what we've heard from Nick Krall, based on what we're seeing. There's not one of those coming. We're 2 spots away, really, a pitcher and a position player, hopefully an outfielder, of this team already being decided.
No, and I think we've almost heard him say that there won't be any sort of earth-shattering trades. Now, I thought whenever he was talking with Cincinnati Reds, like beat writers and stuff like this, and he mentioned that most of their negotiations involved major league players for major league players, I thought that meant that he wasn't going to do any trades of that kind. Fernando Cruz for Jose Trevino proved me wrong, at least on that thought process. But I believe if teams are like, what about CES? What about Noelvi Marte? What about Spencer Steer? What about, Andrew Abbott or Nick Lodolo or somebody like that? I think Nick Krall is shutting down those conversations. Those are what he's talking about, the trades that aren't going to happen. As much as I said, maybe you could send Nick Lodolo for Luis Robert. I don't think he's doing that. So that's not going to be the type of thing that goes down. So when you look at all of that, maybe there's a bullpen spot up for grabs, and there's the spot open for what is got to be Mr. Outside Hire for the outfield, and then you're done, and that's the roster. So I'm intrigued to see how it all plays out. And again, that's all assuming health, and we know that health is never a guarantee with this team going through spring training. So some of that will change, but for the most part, there really isn't an opportunity outside of an injury for Joe Schmo that we aren't thinking about right now to grab a spot.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they might not go trade for an outfielder, but I think if they do find a trade partner, it's not going to be for major leaguer for major leaguer. I think it's going to be from the prospect capital that they have sitting around the minor leagues. That's where a trade will be done, Jeff. And before we get out of here today, I did want to take a minute and talk about some news in the baseball world, not specifically Reds related, but it's Reds adjacent. It ties in, and that is the loss of Hall of Famer Rickey Henderson. At the age of 65, Rickey passed away this week, and Rickey Henderson, I don't think gets the credit for being the amazing baseball player that he truly was. He was a Hall of Famer,
Right.
the 1990 American League MVP, a 10-time All-Star, Jeff, 2-time World Series champ in 89 and 1993. He was an ALCS MVP. He won 3 Silver Slugger awards, a Gold Glove, the all-time leader in stolen bases at 1,406. He's also the all-time leader in runs scored at 2,295. He was really a baseball stud. There's just no way around it. And if you had any doubts about how great Rickey Henderson was, you just needed to be someplace he was, because he would tell you how great he was. I will never forget when he broke Lou Brock's stolen base record. The very first words out of his mouth were, clutching the microphone at third base, holding that base in the air. He said, "Today on this field, I am the greatest of all time." He told everybody what he thought about Rickey, and he talked about Rickey in the third person. He would tell you, coming out of Rickey's mouth, that Rickey was great. And I loved every minute of Rickey Henderson. I think it's a tremendous loss for baseball. And it ties into the Reds, because that team in 1990 that Rickey Henderson was a part of out in Oakland was supposed to come into Cincinnati and just absolutely kick the snot out of this underdog, upstart, wire-to-wire Cincinnati Reds team. And they found out real fast that wasn't going to be the case. But Rickey was tremendous to watch, a joy to watch, and I think a big loss for baseball.
I know his historic profile, and I know that the accomplishments that he had and things like that. I wish I had more of a personal experience getting the chance to watch him. But any time that you have a conversation with a true baseball fan about who the best player ever was, you can tell how true of a baseball fan they are if they bring him up. Because there's obvious guys, there's Babe Ruth, there's Willie Mays. There's so many different players that you could bring up that are obvious. And Rickey Henderson isn't one of those obvious guys, which is a bit of a disservice to him. I'm trying to think of the word there. It's not fair to him, basically, because you look at what he did in his career, and he should be one of the first guys that people mention. But I don't have a lot of those conversations with folks that they're just like, yeah, Rickey Henderson. Like, if you bring him up, a lot of folks go, "Oh yeah, no, that's right. He is definitely in that conversation." So I was shocked whenever you texted me that news had broke about him passing away, and I didn't think even so that he was that old, to be honest with you. And I know that he wasn't whenever he passed away.
So you look at his numbers, and then we'll get out of here, Jeff. But he stole 130 bases in 1982. And this was when there wasn't extra large bases. This was when pitchers could still throw over. No,
like a Brooklyn style pizza. That's how big they were, right?
Pitchers could still throw over 27 times, no matter what you were doing. And he still stole 130 bases in a season. Tremendous talent, Jeff. Going to be missed. And, one of the all-time base stealing speedsters this game has ever seen. And hopefully some of that Rickey magic motivates our guy, Elly de la Cruz, to steal some extra bases. I don't know if I want Elly to start talking in the third person, though. I don't know if I'm down for that. But
just keep telling me that this is your city. That's all I need.
Yeah, I'm all
whatever
for
the city is you're in.
All for Elly stealing 100 bases in a game, or in a season. And that is where we're going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks, as always, for making us in a game too. He can steal 100 there. I'll take that as well. Thanks for making us your first listen. Go make Paul Francis Sullivan, you can call him Sully, your second listen over on Locked On MLB. He's got you covered for all of the national baseball news and perspective you could possibly want. If you want to check out his show, it's easy to find. Just look in today's episode description. Until we're in your feeds again tomorrow, we will continue to watch for the news, watch for the rumors, watch for what's going on in baseball, gather it all up and bring it right back here to keep you locked on Reds every single day.
How many at bats would you need to get 100 stolen bases in one game?
Well, at least 100, probably 2.